We have a great session in store for you coming up just now. Future-proof your career, a new area of high-value skills, sponsored by IEEE-USA. Wow, this is a great topic, and I'm so glad that we're having this today. I'm here to introduce Paige Kesselin. I'm Nancy Ostin. I'm the director of IEEE at Kappa Nu. Paige has an electrical engineering degree from Virginia Tech and a master's degree of information systems management from Carnegie Mellon, and is a member of Eta Kappa Nu. She began her career as the only American engineer working on Solar Impulse 2, the first solar-powered airplane to circumnavigate the globe. This role landed her a spot on the 2017 Forbes 30 Under 30 list, along with feature articles in Glamour, Teen Vogue, and Fast Company. Since Solar Impulse, Paige worked in the manufacturing and finance industries to create implementation strategies for a range of emerging technologies, trends from autonomous vehicles to machine learning. She was the chief operating officer at Crowd AI, a startup named by Forbes as one of the most promising AI companies in 2021. Crowd AI was acquired by Saab Inc. in 2023, and Kasselin led an initiative to launch Saab Inc.'s Autonomy and Artificial Intelligence Accelerator. SCAPAP, I'm going to say that wrong. Sorry, Paige, by
No, it's good.
Saab, my Swedish. Paige is currently the business operations manager of Land Systems division within Saab and focuses on scaling organizations with data-driven insights. Wow! Well, welcome, Paige. We're really thrilled to have you with us here today to talk about this super interesting topic.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Nancy. And hi, everyone. It's really great to be with you all today. I'm especially excited for this presentation because I love getting the chance to speak directly with young professionals. I feel like it wasn't so long that I was directly in your shoes and either in college or starting out my career and just trying to figure out how am I going to succeed in a very ambiguous world. And it was just 10 years ago. It's coming up on my 10-year anniversary of graduating from Virginia Tech with the degree in electrical engineering. So again, I feel like it was just yesterday that I was in your shoes. So I know that we kind of just went through my bio there, but I wanted to really, explain this from the lens I'll be approaching this conversation. So I studied electrical engineering, was involved with IEEE and Eta Kappa Nu, as you heard. I heard that, people were talking about artificial intelligence as almost as if it was sprinkles that you would put on everything and it would work like magic. And that drove me to go to Carnegie Mellon and focus and really get my hands on the keyboard and understand how do you build these solutions to better understand and inform companies how you could implement them in strategic ways. I made the Forbes 30 Under 30 list in 2020 or 2017, which is something I never imagined I would do. And it was for my work, as Nancy mentioned, on the first solar-powered airplane to fly around the world. So all of these crazy things I never knew I would be able to do with my career in the past 10 years has just also shown me and made me want to share with other young professionals that there is so much you can do. You don't have to wait. You can, jump right in and add value from the start. A couple other things I just want to mention here. So I, for the past 5 years, have been writing for IEEE-USA Insight. I have a column called Career Power Up that is all focused on advice for young professionals, women in STEM, and really anyone that's interested in different emerging technologies and how to actually implement them. And today our topic is future-proof your career. So I want to just share, again, I've worked across a couple different industries, manufacturing, finance, a software startup, and now a defense company. And one of the big things that I've been excited to learn from that experience is just working with a range of people. So working from people that are fresh out of undergrad, or even being a really confident, fresh out of undergrad person myself, and also working with people that have spent their entire careers in certain industries. So they're retiring and sharing their knowledge with me. And through that process, I've interviewed over 100 candidates for these different companies and have learned a lot about really what skill sets organizations are looking at today. So Anyways, I've talked way too much about myself by this point, but I wanted to share that background a little bit from my perspective to explain how this content that I'm going to share today was created, and then also how it could add value to you as you're shaping your career. So the topic again is about future proofing your career, right? What are the high value skills that are going to set you apart from your peers? And I know myself, I graduated, like I said, 10 years ago with my undergraduate degree. And I was told that skills like writing and communication were going to set me apart. And now reflecting on that, I'm thinking, are those really the skills that will still set you apart in this ever-changing world? So let's take a look at technology evolution over the past 25 years. And I know there's probably some people on this call that weren't even around at the start of 2000, but really right from the start, broadband internet became widely accessible. So before 2000, it wasn't as easy to just jump on a computer and be able to research anything you wanted. And if you think about that and think about what high value skills employers needed at that time, it was someone that was able to understand the technology, use a technology like a computer, and research that way. But before, when you didn't have access to those types of tools, the skill set was very different. Then in 2004 to 2006, we saw the emergence of social media. So we had Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. It's kind of crazy how ingrained different social media is integrated into our society now. But in 2004 to 2006, it was something totally new that people weren't used to. And especially things like social media have helped create a more global society, right? I have friends that I worked with throughout my career that are in India or Prague, and I'm able to talk to them every single day, and I don't have to send a letter across the ocean. In 2006, the first iPhone came out, so I had one of the first iPhones, the iPhone 3G. It didn't even record video, I remember that, but it was so cool. I remember seeing the big screen, being able to touch it and make things happen, and it was the first feeling of really having that computer in your pocket. Then we had streaming services come out. So Netflix reshaped that industry. We had Siri come out. So before that, the voice control wasn't as big of a thing. And now I don't have overhead lighting in my apartment, and I'll just have, I'll just say, hey, turn on the lights, and everything works. And then finally, even in between 2010 and 2020, commercial space flights became a reality, and space tourism, and all of these different things that, when you look at 2000, people were just excited to be able to access information online, let alone knowing that only, a few years later, we could be going to space on a vacation. And then the last thing just to highlight here, of course, in 2022, with the emergence of ChatGPT and GPT-3, that shook up the entire game. So generative AI had a massive boom, and every single company seems to be coming out with a new product, right? I just had an event the other day where instead of finding some walk-up music, we just generated the music with AI within seconds. It's incredible what we can do today. And it's also a little scary, right? If our careers are average of 40 years long, just look at how much change has happened in the past 25 years. So how do you future-proof your career? And the next thing I want to talk about right here is just the first time I saw this quote, 85% of jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't been invented yet. I couldn't wrap my head around it. So I pulled this from an article on Inc.com in May 2023, but I know concepts like this had been thrown around for a while, right? But it's hard to wrap your head around, right? What will happen with the jobs that currently exist today, and how on earth will the vast majority of the jobs in 2030 be so different? But when you look at that timeline that I showed before, it makes a lot more sense, right? You didn't have things like streaming services for Netflix, and you didn't have space tourism, you didn't have prompt engineering for the generative AI tools. There are so many industries that have been created over the past 25 years that have driven new job responsibilities and new skill sets. So again, this gets us back to our main topic. With this rapid change, how do we future-proof our careers? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I have 4 high value skills that are going to shape and set us apart for this new era of work. So the skills are adaptable, change as the world changes, data driven, use data to support and drive all decision making, reliable, be someone that others can count on, and storyteller, translate the concepts. Oh my gosh, sorry. Translate the complex concepts into compelling narratives. And so I do want to pause here because I know that none of these skills that I'm outlining seem like rocket science. It's not me sharing any secret advice that you need to learn a very niche aspect of engineering or another field in order to be successful and future proof your career. These skills are all around your mindset. And again, as you look at that timeline of how much is changing, it's so hard to predict where the future is going to go. So what we have to do is shift our mindset from learning one thing and being really good at it to being able to adapt and change the way that we're going to work over our entire careers. And I also want to pause here and say that just by showing up to this session, I know that you all are already leaders and successful and on the path to really accomplishing a lot in your careers. So I hope, if anything, you take away from this talk that you're on the right path and everything's going to be great. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into these different skills, and the way I'll talk through them are I'll share a personal example because the skills have some nuances that I think the stories will help with, and then I want to provide some tangible steps for what you can do to really embody this skill. So the first is adaptable. And I want to tell you a quick story, as I mentioned, where I was working with somebody that was fresh out of undergrad. And we wanted to conduct a type of analysis that required a small amount of R programming. So programming in the language R. And I was explaining it to the team, and the person said, hold up, I don't know how to program in R. I only learned how to program in Python, Java, and C++. And so this person did have a valid point, right? You know, they had a skill set. So why was I asking them to do something that wasn't in line with those specific skills? But when we enter into a job, and I could 100% guarantee this, we are going to be asked to do something we've never done before every single day. And that is why adaptability is such an important trend as you're future-proofing your career for the next 40 years. So instead of focusing on a specific skill set, like you know how to program in Python, roll that skill set up one level and realize that your skill is actually being able to understand how programming languages work. You understand the logic and the process of writing languages, because then that's going to help future-proof your skills if a new language comes up, or even if we start having generative AI tools writing more and more code. And this is a high value skill for employees too, because if companies are not changing and embracing emerging technologies, they're going to fall behind or become obsolete. So your company also has this want for people who are going to come in, be adaptable, and step up and be a subject matter expert on a technology that's only been around for months, a year, 5 years. And as a young professional, we're primed to do this, right? We have been exposed to so much technology already. All right, and as I mentioned, here are some tangible steps. So focus on the high level skills. I already hammered that in of really the skill you're not taking away is just being able to do one specific thing, but it's just being able to problem solve and break down any problem into tangible steps and execute it. The second is staying informed. So stay up to date with recent technology advancements. This, when I was in undergrad, I felt was so easy. You know, everywhere around you, something new is coming up, or your teacher's telling you about a new technology or having you try something. Maybe your roommate even's working on something. You're just constantly surrounded by innovation. But when you get into an organization and you're in a specific industry, in a specific role, on a specific team working on a specific project, you start having this narrowed focus, and you have to make sure that you're not having blinders out to what's going on in the rest of the world. The final piece, speak up. So just as I mentioned, organizations want people that are able to hear a new technology is coming out, understand how it's going to be used, and then use it to drive organizational change. So don't feel like because you have the least amount of experience in the room that you should wait for someone else to bring it up. You're probably going to be the most experienced person on a lot of these technologies, just as I said. So speak up and you can start adding value from day one. Okay, so the second skill is data driven. And having this data driven mindset is a little different from what you might assume whenever I initially say data driven here. So there is so much data around us. It's 2025. Organizations are really losing their tolerance for making decisions because I just feel like it's the right thing to do, right? There has to be some tangible metric that's driving our business decisions. And as students or as young professionals, we're used to somebody handing us a data set, and then we're analyzing that data set to really understand the skills that are being taught, right? If we're learning how to do a statistical regression, our teacher gives us a data set and we perform the regression and done. But once you enter into your careers, a lot of times you're not going to be handed that nice data set. You're not even going to be told the methodology that you should be using. You'll be given one high level question, and you have to figure out how can you break that down into the smaller components and leverage whatever information you have to help drive decision making. And when I first started my career, I was asked to do something like this, and I absolutely failed. So I was working in the manufacturing industry, and one of the products we sold were polycarbonate plastic. So my manager, even though, again, this is nothing that I was ever used to, they said, we want you to do an analysis and come up with an estimate for the market size. So how many are sold or how many are made, the market size for polycarbonate, tamper-proof bottle caps for alcohol in Mexico. Like, what on earth is this? This was the most bizarre question. Give me an equation, give me a right or wrong answer. That's where I felt comfortable as an engineer. But I had to take this problem and run with it. And as I told you already, spoiler alert, I definitely failed a bit. So I just remember frantically Googling, and I was looking to say how many of, blah, blah, blah are made in Mexico each year and looking for that right answer. And my manager was asking me for updates, and I kept, dragging my feet saying, I'll give you something tomorrow. I'll give you something next week. And then finally they said, just show me what you've been doing. And I really just had a presentation with a number that said, I think it's 300 million, blah, blah, blah. And they looked very confused. And at that moment, I realized this wasn't an exercise of, can Paige guess how many jelly beans are in the jar, right? This was an exercise of, here's a question. How can you break it out into smaller steps? And then what data do you have to support the decisions you're making? So as I mentioned, data-driven isn't just about analyzing the data, but it's also about being able to derive insights and then translate those insights into actionable decisions and convince people that the methodology you used is the right methodology and they should trust your answer. So when we're talking about data-driven, thinking outside the box. So a lot of times, as I mentioned, right, you're not going to have a nice spreadsheet that's directly handed to you. You're going to have to maybe find data or collect data, or think even that data could be conversations you had with people. So if you talked with 10 subject matter experts and they all told you the same thing, that's a data point. Anything you can use to justify the decision that you're making or the proposal that you're submitting is going to be a high value skill that employers need. Follow a process and make educated guesses. So that is, again, exactly what I did not do with that market sizing example. But what is important to remember is that even though I didn't know the answer, no one really knew the answer. So just remember that. So even though it's uncomfortable for you, your employer is giving you something to solve. And it doesn't matter if it's not 100% right. You just have to be making the best decision with the data available to you. And then finally, quantify everything. Support any argument by putting numbers to the words. And this is something I always have to remind myself too, because I will say something like, most of the time this happens, but what does most mean? And so let me just go to the next slide to show you these examples of quantifying. So the issue has come up a lot recently. What is better is if you can explain that. So say the issue has come up 172 times, 86% of the time in the last 200 samples taken from this date to this date. Anything that can really show that you know what you're doing, and if people want to push back because they don't agree with what you're doing, they know where they can push. So similar, we exhausted all options for improvement. It's so easy for your leadership team to say, well, did you try this? Did you try that? But if you explain exactly what you did, then your solution recommendation proposal, it's going to be much stronger. Okay, so I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you right now, but we have 2 more high value skills to go. And this one's reliable. I used to think reliable was just a given, right? If you're given a task, you're going to do it and you're going to do it on time. And if you have questions, you're going to follow up with someone. But I've realized that's not always the case. And this is actually a skill that can set you apart as we're moving 2025 and beyond. So it's especially important because we're operating in a global society, and a lot of times people work remotely or not in the same office as the rest of their team. So being reliable is more and more important. The story I have here was I was working with a person one time, and I asked them to do an analysis. I needed some data visualizations for a big meeting I was having with the leadership team of a massive beverage manufacturer. So this was a big meeting. I wanted to make sure that we had everything right to show our final solution. And I gave them the task. I told them exactly what I needed them to do. I told them the timeline for when the meeting was going to happen. And then I waited. So about a week before the meeting, I reached out to the person because we all worked remotely. I reached out to the person and said, hey, I wanted to follow up. Is this going to be done in time? Nothing. 2 days later, I sent them a note again. Nothing. A day later, still nothing. I ended up canceling the meeting and said we had to push it, which could potentially, create some damage to our brand because we were pushing a meeting with a big leadership team that we had on the calendar, but I wasn't sure if we were going to have the results that we needed. I woke up the next morning, the day of the would have been meeting, and I saw at 1:45 a.m. somebody had sent me all of the visualizations I needed. But 1:45 a.m. was definitely too late, and I would have had no idea going into the day if we were going to be prepared or not. I like this story because it shows that reliability isn't just about doing something by the date that you need, but really creating a whole experience that you are a reliable person. And again, I've mentioned, right, because you all are spending your time at an event like this, that you all are leaders and understand these things. But again, it's really a skill that's going to set you apart, because the person, whenever I talked to them about this, they didn't understand. They said, I sent it to you before the meeting. What's the problem? But as I mentioned, the problem was that I had no confidence that we were going to have the information we needed. So to be reliable, over communicate, right? If somebody gives you a task and says, I need this by this date, you can follow up and say, great, these are some of the other things I'm working on, but I think we're confident that we're going to be able to get it done a day early. Let's meet, let's review beforehand. Let's not send it in the middle of the night. Second, don't procrastinate. I know that that's harder or easier said than done, and I do it all the time as well, but the big thing here was that when the person sent this result to me in the middle of the night, it wasn't because they had other things going on. And if it was because you're working around the clock and you're not able to get to something until the middle of the night, that's something you have to tell your team, right? I would have never scheduled a meeting with a leadership team if I knew that somebody was so swamped that they had to be working in the middle of the night. So that goes back to communication as well. And then finally, building that brand of reliability. I know it's kind of seems weird that you have to remind people that you're working on something, but the other day I followed up with someone just because I hadn't talked to them in a while and said, "Hey, I know that we haven't talked, but I want to let you know I'm still working on this. My plan is to share it with you next week." Being able to anticipate questions and answer them before they get asked are just going to allow you to build that brand of reliability. And when you have that brand, people are going to come to you with the higher value task, the stretch assignments, because they know that you're not going to drop the ball. All right. So the final high value skill here is storyteller. I know, especially from being an engineer, there are so many technical projects that you're working on that it's sometimes hard to understand why it's so important to invest the time to be a strategic technical storyteller. And there's a lot of reasons. Once you enter into your career, or as you continue to grow within your career, you'll realize that you're not always just handed a project, you work on it, as long as it's good, it's done. A lot of times you're going to have to influence people why your project should continue to proceed. So I've had so many meetings where I'm sharing the outputs of a project and we're going through different stages, wondering if we're going to keep moving forward or if it's not worth the investments for the company. If you're not able to strategically tell this story and explain to people why your concepts are important, it's going to be much harder to get the internal funding, or even if you're working with different companies and trying to get them to extend a contract or buy into your solution, you need to be able to tell these stories. And so there's a couple things when being a storyteller. You want to be able to choose the best medium for communicating your message. And this is important because being a storyteller, it involves a lot of movement on your behalf, right? It kind of makes you need to adjust to the way your audience is going to best digest the message versus what you feel most comfortable with. So choosing the best medium for communicating your message is important, because if your whole team uses something like PowerPoint and you send a Word document, there's a good chance that they're not going to digest the message or listen to what you're trying to say. Same if you are comfortable using Slack, but your entire company uses email. You need to understand, if you're trying to drive decision makers in a certain way, that you have to find the medium that they use best. Second, you want to remind the audience what you're talking about. So this is something I've definitely been guilty of, where I'm new to a team, I'm asked to step up and present, and I'm so concerned about myself. I'm thinking, am I going to mess up? Am I coming across like I have no idea what I'm doing? Because in reality, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I forget that a lot of times people are coming from one meeting to another, and they need that moment to reset and remember what the discussion's about today. So it's so important to just pause and ask people, and pause and remind people what you're talking about. So saying, this is the project we're working on. This was the step that we're focused on. What we need from you is X, Y, and Z, and that's the goal of this meeting. It's going to go a long way and allow people to really prepare themselves to listen before you start sharing your message. Step 3 is letting the slide do your work for your audience. And this was something I learned when I was working at JP Morgan Chase that I found very helpful. So especially because I mentioned earlier on in this presentation that the world is global and a lot of times people are going back and forth between different meetings. It's so important for people to be able to refer to the slide that you previously presented and know what they should have taken away from it, right? I remember whenever I took classes on presentation or technical writing in school that, you were supposed to just have a big picture or a graph. But what you want to do instead is if you're putting a graph on a slide, explain what the audience should be taking away. The graph is there to support it and show that you've done your work and to show trends, but you don't want someone taking away the wrong message. So just let them know what they should be learning from this graph. Let the slide do the work for your audience. And then hand in hand with that, building a document that speaks for itself. So this, with the global companies, with remote work, with people referring to documents years later, you want to make sure that if there are results to share, you don't just put a big banner that says results. You assume that this document's going to be shared. You assume that this is actually going to be the documentation for when someone picks this project up again, and allow the document to speak for itself. I have an example of this because I think it helps a bit to visualize, but instead of just having results, again, what were the high level takeaways? What was the methodology that you used? And what were the next steps? And then again, over here, you have some different visualizations and have those called out with the little green dots showing how they connect to the different methodologies. It might feel uncomfortable because we've been taught to just put a big picture on the slide or to have as few words as possible. But you have to understand there's a difference when you're building content for a business purpose, that this is going to be a document that is going to be referred to as the final report for the work that you've done. All right. So the final step on how to be a storyteller is remember that the only thing that matters is that your audience understands the message. I definitely did this when I started my career, but I didn't realize that I needed to change the way I present depending on if it was a big audience and and no one had to make a decision versus a leadership team where the information I was sharing them in that meeting was going to make or break a decision. So I remember rehearsing a presentation, being so afraid of messing up my words or not using the body language and walking or pacing, all of those different things that we think about. But really, when it came down to it, I went into the meeting in front of the senior leadership team. They were trying to make a decision with the information I was sharing, and I flew through everything so quickly. I was happy that I didn't miss any of the words that I planned to share. But then as I looked around, everybody was kind of confused. I never gave anybody a moment to digest the content that I was sharing, which then created the need for another meeting where I was presenting the results slower or allowing time for questions. So it doesn't matter how well you present if your audience doesn't get your message. All right, so with that, these are the 4 high value skills for a new era. These will help you future-proof your career, being adaptable because there is no certainty in what new technology evolution or new technology innovation is going to come out, but we have to be ready to harness it and then become a leader for that technology in our company. You have to be data-driven and remember that you should never use feelings to drive decision, but anything that you can do to support it, even if it's not a nice spreadsheet or a database you're querying, anything can be data if you're shaping it in the right way and building that narrative. Reliable. It seems that reliability should be a given, but being able to gain trust and letting the team know that you're someone that's not going to drop the ball is going to open up opportunities for you. You're going to get the high value projects, which will then just enable you to continuously learn and then future proof your career for those next 30 to 40 years. Finally, storyteller. At the end of the day, you can build the coolest thing in the world, but if you're not able to communicate your message, explain why it's adding value, and get the buy-in from your organization or your customers, then your solution is going to fall flat. And we all have these incredible minds and all of these ideas. And it's just so important to remember that focusing on the story you're telling is as equally as important as the technology you're building. And I want to end on this slide. So I talked at the start about how the evolution of technology from 2025 or from 2000 to 2025 was crazy to see that we went from the internet to being able to generate reports and music and images all within seconds. We know that there's going to be a lot of AI, especially in the generative AI space over the next couple of years, but we have no idea what are going to be the biggest technology evolutions as we move into 2025. So that's why it's important not just to focus on those individual skills, but to roll your skills up and just be able to adapt, be reliable, make decisions with data, and tell that story throughout your career. So I want to open the floor to questions. If you have any questions, you could submit it in the Q&A, but I really liked sharing this with you all today and would love to just continue the discussion.
Paige, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I mean, I got so much out of this conversation and really appreciate your sharing your experiences and really how specific you got. I love you showing the results, the one slide, kind of what exactly did you mean? I know, we talk about this a lot in IEEE and in IEEE Etiquette, and that element of storytelling, so important. How do you tell your story? Because I think you bring great examples of that data, but then being able to communicate it, I think that's a new word, right? Storytelling.
Yeah, thank you. I think that especially the storytelling aspect is so important, and I think storytelling also allows it makes it a bit more technical, right? You're not just putting content on a page or putting content on slides. You're trying to figure out how can I get my audience to buy into what I'm sharing with them.
But I think
So
that brings that emotional part of it because you talked a lot about data and again, how to be reliable, how to be there, how to be present. But I think the storytelling brings the human side back into it, and
yeah,
which I think is so interesting because again, people are moved by people. People do buy people. When
yes,
you're presenting yourself to future-proof your career, all the things you talked about is that's about how your brand and how what you bring to it, and your ability to tell that story is kind of that personal one touch of it. The data's not emotional, but the storytelling can be can touch a
yeah.
whole different part of that emotions that drive decisions and drive your career. So some good questions here. So one person asked, where might we find opportunities to practice a storyteller and honor and owning the skills as we prepare to enter the workforce?
Yeah, that's really a great question. And I know it's also hard to say we have opportunities to tell stories all around us. But I think that really when you're looking for opportunities to tell stories, the first step is to listen. So if you're listening to, a person that you're working with in a team project, or if you're listening to your teacher and really understanding what or getting those details of what they value. And then as you're telling the story, you make sure that you hit on those certain points. So,
Mhm.
for example, there are so many times where I think an aspect of the work I'm doing is really cool or interesting, but then when I talk to people, I find that they gravitate to something else. And what I have to do as a storyteller is realize that even though I think it's really interesting, I have to make sure I'm spending more time focusing on that thing that they value. or
Right, like you
putting,
said, the message, is the message getting there versus
yes,
what I wanna say versus the message I need them to receive.
yes, exactly. So I know that's kind of a hard answer, but really just
Yep,
finding any way to tweak your answers, and then eventually
mhm.
you'll be able to practice being an overall storyteller.
But I think that goes back to your be present, uh, piece of advice. When you're present, you can listen for what people are telling you they need versus what you wanna tell them you need.
Yes, exactly.
So this is a really good question. How did student memberships and organizations like Get a Kappa or IEEE help you in your career?
Yeah, so it's actually been so interesting because I remember when I was a sophomore at Virginia Tech, I signed up for IEEE, and never did I think, now 12, 13 years later, I would be as involved with the organization as I am today. But just the community that I've been able to access through IEEE Eta Kappa Nu has been incredible. And I encourage people, especially after leaving university, to continue on with those groups of people because, as I mentioned, it's so important to stay informed. So when you're being adaptable, right,
Mhm.
it's so important to take a step away from your day-to-day career, go to an IEEE conference, for example, and just hear what other people are working on, because
Mhm.
that can help you really shape the way you want to adjust the path that you're on, and help you have a competitive edge.
Oh, I so agree because I think, professionals belong to a professional organization, and where else do you get to network and get new ideas and see the new technologies and meet these other experts? I mean, it's really awesome. I get to meet the coolest people in the most wonderful places and learn all kinds of amazing things. So I love it when people take advantage of that because it's so good. The other thing that I always think is so important about organizations like IEEE and Ed Cap is it gives you a chance to practice this in a low risk environment. I mean, if you're taking a leadership role in doing this for your branch or your chapter or within IEEE or Ed Cap somewhere, boy, it's a low risk way to practice these skills. And if you don't succeed at 100%, that's okay. You learn from those things and you get better in your professional life and you get better as you move forward. But I think those volunteer opportunities really prepare you in ways that are so low risk and
Absolutely.
a good place to get feedback where it doesn't cost you your job.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about practicing storytelling, right? There are so many opportunities. You can volunteer to speak at a conference. You can volunteer to do so many things that can allow you to build up those storytelling abilities. But especially as you are entering into the workforce, a lot of times people aren't just going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, we want you to do this. We want you to do that." You have to advocate for yourself. You have to put your name in the hat.
Mhm.
And that's just going to allow you to keep practicing these skills.
Right, so those volunteer opportunities become key, especially for young people who don't have maybe a lot of other things to harken back to in their careers or even as students, but their volunteer opportunities provide that to them. So I think taking on leadership roles and stretching yourself there is a really easy way to do it and so low risk. Another question came in about how valuable is making a 5-year plan or a 10-year, for instance, for our careers. I remember I wrote a 10-year plan when I started this job.
Yeah, that is a great question. And actually, I wrote an IEEE article about this because making a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan are so important. And I'm a big believer that you want to have achievable goals, stretch goals, and then, oh my gosh, how will I ever do something like this goal? And I remember, as the first year that I was studying engineering, my mom sent me the Forbes 30 Under 30 magazine. And that was the first year the list came out. And I remember going through it and thinking, wow, these people are doing incredible things, but what will I ever do that will get me on the same list as these people? And then 5 years later, I had that in the back of my head as this outlandish goal, and I was able to achieve it. So I think that making those 5-year goals and really just considering where you want to go and making sure that you're taking the sub steps to accomplish those are so important. It's
I think
also
that's
so
true. Yeah, having
go
those visions and maybe mentors or people like your mom in this case was almost like a mentor saying she was probably saying to you subconsciously, "I know you, Paige. I know you can do this."
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, there's just so many ways to take this question because having a support system like that too, if you're going to try to accomplish some of these outlandish goals, you need people around you saying, you got this, you can do it. Because and if you have people around you saying, I'm not sure if you could do it, just say, okay, I'm not talking to you. Like I can't have you on my advice council because we really have unlimited potential for our career, and being surrounded by people that say you got this is going to be the most valuable thing you can do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, again, this is another way that you check yourself and all of these things that this great advice you've given us. Um, here's a good one. Is there a right amount of over communication? And if you're struggling on a task, what is a good time to reach out for help?
Yeah. That's a great question too, because you also don't want to spend all of your time communicating. And you also don't want to every single day saying, hey, I'm doing my job. Hey, I'm doing my job, right? You want to find that right balance. And I think it's an intuition that you'll start learning as you progress in your career. But
Mhm.
just if it's been a couple days or it's been a week and you know a deadline's approaching and you haven't reached out to somebody, it's time to reach out and just explain what's going on. I would also say it's also important to ask for help. So a lot of times I know for myself, if I'm giving somebody a task at work, I'm not expecting them to be able to do it 100% and then come back to me with the right answer. I want them to take some time, think through, and put together a strategy, and then come to me if they have questions. And this is actually where it's really important for the storytelling because storytelling doesn't have to happen in front of a massive audience. But if somebody came to me and said, hey, this is the problem you asked me to solve, these are the steps I was doing to look into this. I'm not getting the right answer, but do you recommend I go down another
Yeah, am
path?
I going this right direction? Do you think I need to switch directions or go other places?
Exactly. So just saying, "Hey, I don't know what to do," isn't as helpful as saying, "This is what I've tried. What do you recommend I do next?"
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Not just going, "Hey, I'm lost." Just saying, "These are what my thought processes are, and this is what I've kind of been going through. What do you think?" I think this is another place too that maybe this network that you could build through an organization like IEEE, like EDICAP, you have other experts you could go to, probably even outside of your company or maybe inside of your company that are colleagues in a different way that can
Mhm.
help direct you. I know I have people that I can call up if I'm struggling with something and say, hey, I've got this thing. They're not my boss, so they're not someone who can, give me a, can say, boy, you don't know how to do your job. But there are other people. So that network of people that you can probably go to group of people that you can have that can help you along the way with maybe another way of looking at things or another place to go ask the question.
Ac Yep, exactly.
So I think that's always a good thing. How can we join projects and groups on site or remotely to own our expertise in new technologies? Being an IEEE member and IEEE Computer Society member, what are the benefits for other computer science undergrads to create impact in the tech industry? Boy, that's a packed question.
Yeah, I know. I'm taking another look at that. So,
I think
yeah, I
again,
mean,
I just think the technical conferences, like you said, that network that you build, right?
yeah, and I also think, when it comes to joining projects or groups and and just creating impact on the tech industry, I think it really first starts with you raising your hand and letting people know that you have a certain expertise. It's something that I've had to become a bit better at because, I assume that everybody understands what my passions are, what experiences I've had, and
Mhm.
would recommend I do certain things. But a lot of times, especially now where people aren't staying in their careers for an entire, 20, 30, 40 years, people are switching companies. You constantly have to be reminding people of what your expertise is in order for you to be put in a position where you're able to really drive impact in the tech industry. And I also think for joining projects or groups outside of your work, it's again just taking that initiative and making yourself known and sharing the information you have to share. One of the things actually, so I mentioned that I write for IEEE, and over the past 5 years, I've published 75 articles. And a lot of times people, yeah, I don't know if I said that before, but
75.
I still cannot believe that, I've been doing that for 5 years and I've had the chance to share my experiences with people that way. But it all started because I was just posting my own articles on LinkedIn. So I had some messages that I wanted to share for young professionals and just posted them on LinkedIn. So anyone could write these articles on LinkedIn and you could build up your personal brand there.
I think that's a really good point. I think there's some strategies we can use outside of our actual employment to do that, to present ourselves as experts. I think that is really an important thing. All those other places that you build your brand and your expertise so that you're ready not just in this job, but in the jobs to come. Because I think that's
Mhm.
so great. Well, Paige, this has been a fascinating discussion today. Great questions from the audience and lots of great interaction. And I really appreciate the time that you put into putting this together for us, because I think this future-proofing your career, everyone's a little bit worried about that, right? And AI, is all its opportunities can be a little bit scary, but like you said, there's no stopping it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. I have my contact information on the screen still. And if anyone has questions, please feel free to reach out.